Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Black-eyed children encounter, Casper, Wyoming. I was listening to your radio interview with David Weatherly because I am seeking information concerning black-eyed children. I hope it is okay to direct my concerns directly to you. I am a widow with a teenage daughter in Casper, Wyoming, an area west of the city near the county airport. The property had been in my husband's family for many years. I recently purchased an adjacent home and property after the owner passed away. This is where the story actually begins. I settled on the new property just after Thanksgiving. Since it was purchased as is, it was fairly inexpensive but requires a lot of work. I hired an auction house to come in and remove the contents for future sale. The auction was scheduled for next week, but there have been a few odd things going when the items were first listed for sale. I received a phone call from the auctioneer a few weeks ago. He wanted to know if I had any knowledge concerning the contents from the house. I told him that I didn't know the owner that well, but that I did know that he had lived on the property since the 1950s. The auctioneer said that a young woman came into the auction house and told him that the property and contents were stolen, and that it belonged to her family in North Dakota. She didn't give her name, but assured him that she had documentation to prove her assertions, and that she planned to take legal action if the sale continued. I contacted my attorney and the realtor who verified that the property sale was legal and that there were no prior claims to it. The young woman, who was described as very plain, thin with long black hair, has not been heard from since. It was decided that the auction would continue as scheduled. Then this past Tuesday, New Year's Day around noon, someone rang the doorbell. I was in the kitchen and I knew my daughter would answer the door. I heard the door open and the voice of a young girl. My daughter soon yelled loudly, "Mom, come here." As I walked down the hallway toward the door, I noticed three girls standing on the porch. They stood without movement staring directly at me. As I approached, I was shocked when I soon noticed that their eyes were completely black in color. I asked if I could help them. The tallest girl asked if they could come in to talk about the house and property I had recently purchased. I immediately replied that we were busy, and that I would give them the phone number to my attorney if they had any inquiries. They just turned and walked away without saying anything else. Each of the girls had blonde hair and wore heavy winter clothing with boots. They seemed to be in their early teens. I watched as they walked toward the highway and eventually lost sight of them. Since then we have not been contacted by anyone concerning the property. The auction has been postponed for other reasons and has not been rescheduled. My attorney continues to research the property records for any other information. I suppose the most important question is, who are these children? Do I need to be concerned? I look forward to your comments. S.A.
Black-eyed boy at the door. This incident involved my fiancée in April 2011. To this day she refuses to talk about it, but I decided to submit it here to see what others can get out of it. We then lived in Bangor, Maine. It was around 10:30 p.m. that evening. I was on a late shift at work and she was home alone with our cat in our apartment. She said she was reading while the cat was sleeping on her lap. All at once, the cat suddenly sat up and stared intently at the door leading outside. He then began mewling and scampered into the bedroom. He had never acted like that before, so she assumed it was just another weird thing that cats did. Just as she got comfortable again, the doorbell rang. She thought it was strange that someone would want to visit at that time of night. She got up and peeked through the hole, but saw nothing. So she turned away from the door when there were 3 loud knocks. She was immediately alarmed, but curiosity got the best of her, and she cracked the door to see who was there. She saw a boy of around 11 or 12, though fairly short, standing there. She opened the door to ask what he wanted. She assumed that this child had either gotten locked out of another apartment or was asking for help. That's when he looked up at her, and she noticed his eyes. The light from the apartment spilled out into the hallway, affirming that his eyes were completely black. She said she was paralyzed with shock as the child asked to be let in. By that time, the cat had come out of the bedroom and laid on the floor behind her, ears folded back and hissing. She said she felt compelled to say yes, but as she stared into those cold black eyes, she suddenly slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. She said she listened for the child's footsteps in the hallway, but she heard nothing. After several terrifying minutes, she peeked out the door and the child was gone or disappeared. She said she had never been so scared in her life. She thought the cat hissing may have interrupted her paralysis, allowing her to regain her thoughts, and quickly closed the door. She never discusses it, though I'm sure she wonders what may have happened if she had let the black-eyed boy into the apartment. Claude.
Black-eyed kids in Rome. So this was August of 2017. I had just graduated about a week prior from college, summer classes, and as part of my graduation gift my parents and grandparents went in together to buy me a flight to Rome. I'm a major history buff, so I've always wanted to go to Europe and Rome, Italy especially. One of my friends also went along with me. I'll call him Caleb, so I don't have to type out, my friend, a ton, but not his real name. Anyways, as both Caleb and I were recent college grads, we didn't exactly have a ton of money to spend on vacation, so we stayed in the area of Rome by Termini in a budget hotel. So, before I proceed, a few things about Rome because there were some misconceptions I had before going. The first is that Rome is dirty and just feels sketchy. Because of this you instinctively are looking over your shoulder, and I just felt paranoid. The area that Caleb and I stayed at was near Termini, the main train bus hub of the city. Well, it was a super convenient location, less than a 5-minute walk, and we could access the metro or a bus to anywhere in the city or cross-city train. The area just felt run down with graffiti all over. I mean, more than usual than Rome. The other thing you should know is that Romans like to eat long meals and eat very late, whereas back here in the US I typically eat dinner around 5:30 to 6, and generally finished well before 7:30. Some of the restaurants in Rome don't even open until 7 p.m., which leads to you being out a lot later than you had intended. So one evening after dinner, it was probably around 9:30 or so, Caleb and I were leaving the restaurant to the metro station to head back to Termini when we noticed 2 children were following us. Now, you hear online that a lot of scammers use children to distract you, so I put my hand in my pocket around my wallet and walked a bit faster. Both of the kids were probably around 10 or 12. The lighting wasn't the greatest and the sun had set, but they were dressed in dark clothing. Whether it was black or brown or even maroon, I couldn't really tell at the time. One was a boy and one was a girl. The boy had a very short haircut, only slightly longer than a buzz cut, whereas the girl was wearing a beret, dark colored, and had long, slightly curly hair. I felt a bit of unease because something didn't seem normal. At the time I didn't think anything paranormal, but was worried about being mugged or pickpocketed. Anyways, eventually I stop hearing their footsteps behind me, and when I look back I don't see them or anyone. The metro ride back to Termini was uneventful. I didn't particularly look for the children, but I didn't notice them if they were around. Once at Termini it was only a couple of minutes to the hotel. Despite it being rather dark, Rome doesn't seem to have adequate street lighting for a city that eats so late. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Anyways, I went to my room and Caleb went to his. At this time it was probably around 10 o'clock at night. So I go to take a shower before bed, and midway through my shower I think I hear a knock on my door. I don't think a whole lot about it. This is a cheap hotel, and I doubt that it's soundproof enough that someone standing outside of my door couldn't hear the shower running. So 2 minutes pass and I don't hear any more knocking, and I finish my shower, put on sweatpants and a t-shirt and look out the peephole, and I see the 2 children from earlier just standing there. Now the peephole distorts things, so I really didn't think I saw what I saw, but let me try to describe what I saw. The boy was wearing a maroon button-down shirt with brown pants. He had black hair just barely longer than a buzz cut. But what stood out was his white skin. Maybe it was the lighting in the hall, but I don't think I've seen anyone with as white of skin as his, and his female companion. It was almost as if someone had painted their skin white. It's very hard to describe without seeing it. It looked almost bloodless. There was just no warmth to it. His eyes looked to be black, almost like if someone was squinting and that the eyes looked like they weren't there. It wasn't like someone had colored contact lenses at all. It was a very, very strange thing indeed. The girl was standing behind the boy, so I didn't get as good of look at her, but she had very dark brown hair, clearly different than the color of the boy's hair, and it was curly. She was wearing a black beret and a black dress. She had the same weird artificial-looking white skin and the same eyes that looked like someone was squinting. Now at this point I was freaking out a bit. The hotel required a keycard to operate the elevator to get to the second story where my room was, which made it rather odd that some random kid, who we never did see with any parents, would follow myself and Caleb halfway across Rome, and end up in the same hotel, on the same floor, and randomly knock on my door. And not just knock, but knock and stand there for at least a couple of minutes. I didn't say anything to indicate that I'd be coming to the door. At this point I double-checked the chain lock to make sure it was secure, but I think the kids must have thought I was going to open the door when I heard the boy's voice, or at least I assume it was the boy's voice, as it certainly didn't sound feminine. Say, "Aren't you going to let us in? We're lost." Now, prior to hearing about the black-eyed kids, I thought this was the creepiest part of it. Because after 4 days of being in Rome, outside of Caleb, pretty much everyone did not speak good English, and the ones that did speak decent English had a very clear accent of some sort. This though did not, it was clearly the voice of a native English speaker, and I couldn't detect that there was really any accent. As in, it didn't sound like anyone from England or have a noticeable southern accent. I decided that I'd had enough and just didn't make another sound and moved to my bed. I must have just sat there waiting for an hour or so, trying not to make a noise or make any indication that I was in the room, hoping that they'd decide that their prank or scam wasn't having any effect, and leaving me alone. I decided against texting Caleb about it. After all, I was probably just paranoid about nothing, and it was just me being nervous being 5,000 miles away from home, mixed with what I probably would have considered rather funny or mildly annoying, rather than scary if it was back in the US. I suppose eventually I fell asleep and tried to wipe the memory of it from my mind. Caleb never mentioned anything about it, so I didn't mention anything to him. The rest of my time in Rome, and my time in Venice and Naples, were without any incident, and I haven't encountered anything like this in the US. RB.
Black-eyed kids confrontation walking home. This is an encounter I experienced in the summer of 2009. I was born and raised in the plains of Texas, specifically in an area where black-eyed kids sightings are prevalent. I had heard the stories, tales, legends, whatever you want to call them, since I was a young man, but never truly believed them. The black-eyed kids was mainly something I entertained as a joke, or something to get a rise out of people. This changed in the summer of 2009. It was a warm night in June. I was up late, around 2 a.m., as I typically liked to stay up late, especially in the summer since it would stay fairly warm even after the sun went down. I had just run up to the store to grab a big fountain drink and was returning into my house through the back door when I was approached by 2 children, a boy and a girl. I was very startled once I realized they were there, since I wasn't expecting to encounter anyone in my backyard so late at night. The little boy asked, "Could we come in? We need to use the phone, we are lost." This is when I noticed the blackness of their eyes. Both of them had eyes so black they were like pits. This is also when my heart sank. I couldn't believe I was actually seeing them. That they were there right in front of me. As I mentioned, before I had heard the legends of the black-eyed children most of my life, so there was no way I was going to let them in my house. I darted in the back door and locked it as quickly as I could. Once I was inside, I ran upstairs and flipped on the lights to try and see if they were still outside. Thankfully by then, they were gone. I had so much adrenaline pumping by that point, though, that I grabbed a weapon and began searching the house and making sure all doors and windows were locked. It took me hours to get to sleep that night, and it's an encounter that will stay with me for the rest of my life. These entities took the form of something most people view as innocent, weak, mild, and try to trick unsuspecting people to do God knows what with or to them. I am just glad my reflexes kicked in and I was able to live to tell the tale. PM.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.